Hello, good evening. I'm Sophy Ridge and you're watching the Politics Hub, and you join us as we await President Joe Biden. He's about to deliver his final foreign policy speech as President of the United States this hour. He's going to be speaking at the State Department in Washington, and of course we'll bring you that speech live in full here on Sky News just as soon as he stands behind that podium that we're keeping an eye on. In the meantime, though, I want to update you on politics back here in the UK, because today was the launch of the government's artificial intelligence strategy, the AI Opportunities Action Plan, to give it its proper name. From schools to the NHS, AI is going to be unleashed on public services to help them reach their full potential. That's according to the PM. Now, there's been lots of analysis today saying that the AI speech was overshadowed by the economy. And in a sense, that's true. There are obvious questions on the falling pound, the rising cost of government debt, the Chancellor's future, but it misses the big point, because this is the economy story. This is the basket in which Keir Starmer is putting his eggs, whether it's growth, efficiency savings, or how to answer that all-important conundrum about how you deliver good public services when there's no money around. AI is the answer to the economy question. But it's a really risky one, because frankly, nobody really understands AI. Not even the AI experts, they freely admit they don't know where this is going to take the world and how it will impact everything from the jobs market to our energy supply. Now, at this point, I would usually say that we'll try and get the answers on the show tonight, but I'm not going to pretend we're going to get the answers to AI. What I can promise you, though, is that we'll at least be trying to ask the right questions. So first tonight, I've been putting some of those big questions to the Science Secretary, Peter Kyle. Let's hear what he had to say. Thank you very much for being on the programme tonight. So today you've launched the AI Opportunities Action Plan. So what's the kind of dummy's guide to it then?
Well, AI is going to transform society and our economy profoundly. I mean, think about the impact electricity had on the economy and society when it was released. It's a universal technology, so it's going to get absolutely everywhere. So we need to make sure two things. Firstly, we have the infrastructure as our country that can withstand this, because it's going to need enormous amounts of electricity. It's going to need the data processing centres, those factories of AI. Data goes in, needs to be processed, and it needs to go out in a way that's usable. That's what data centres are all about. But it also needs a second thing, a government that is actively trying to shape how this technology will filter through the economy and society, so we can make sure that it has equity baked in at the outset. Those communities that need to benefit from it do, because I'm not going to stand on the sidelines when technology that is so potent starts to interact with society and the economy and not do everything I can do to make sure that it benefits positively people who need to benefit the most, get the most, and that no community is ever left behind.
There's so much to talk about on this, but I just want to pick up on the first thing you said about having the infrastructure, because it feels to me that this is really important and it's something we haven't discussed much today, because look, AI uses an awful lot of energy, right? And there are already concerns about the UK's energy supply. We pay higher prices for electricity than anywhere in the developed world. Isn't AI going to put even more pressure on that supply?
That's right. And AI, this is when it gets so complicated, because AI is going to, the processing of it is going to put a lot of pressure on our energy systems if we don't act now. But also, AI is going to help us distribute electricity more efficiently and effectively. It's going to help us conserve electricity in the household. So these things are very, very complicated. Now, as part of our plan for change, we've created a new AI Energy Council, jointly chaired by Ed Miliband and myself. That brings in the voice of the AI industry to help us understand the requirements and the needs and the disruption in energy going forward, so that we can start strategically planning for a future that caters for the energy needs, does so in a renewable way.
This all sounds very, sensible, but I just don't understand this thing, right? You're pushing ahead with AI, which is an electricity sucker. Mm-hmm. But in the last few weeks, our supplies of energy more widely have hit, worryingly low levels. We pay 50 times the usual rate for gas to keep the lights on. And at the same time, we have a government that is doing the opposite of diversifying our energy supply. I mean, don't you need to tell Ed Miliband, look, we're using all this new energy. We need to start getting it from everywhere, not just ruling out oil and gas.
Well, firstly, you said that we're a sensible government, and that is amazing to hear. No,
I said it sounds sensible.
Sounds sensible.
But actually, what I don't understand is, if you're saying that Ed Miliband's on this council, why it doesn't feel like it's feeding through into the policy. It feels like you're limiting the amount of energy we're using at a time when we need more than ever.
we've inherited a situation where the strategic needs of the future of our economy, AI, hasn't even been considered in government.
I'm talking about the specific energy plans that you put in place via Ed Miliband, shutting off new oil and gas at a time when you're saying we need, AI going to use more energy. I don't get it.
So you've said that the requirements of the people investing and the organisations investing in infrastructure, they also want sustainable renewable. Now, Google, Microsoft, AWS, Amazon Web Services, the big providers of data infrastructure who are investing billions and billions into our economy, they also have their net zero targets to meet, sometimes 2035, sometimes 2040.
We all want net zero. Don't get me wrong, we all want that to happen.
And they are the ones that are paying for it.
But at the same time, at a time when we've seen it recently with cold weather, when wind levels are low, what are we going to do?
These are opportunities. Because we have businesses that are willing to put billions in. Today alone, we announced an additional £14 billion worth of investment into our AI sector. In 6 months since we came in, it's £24 billion.
Have you brought Ed Miliband to chair this council to keep him in line? Is that the idea?
No, what I've done is I'm co-chairing with Ed Miliband to bring the strategic needs of the industry of the future, which is going to place, as you say, and I accept, huge burdens on our energy, but massive opportunities for our entire country, exciting opportunities. So let's get the strategic intention there. Ed and I, on the Department for Science and Technology, which is representing the industries, has the connections in the industries. Ed, which is rolling out the energy needs of the future. But we're talking about small nuclear reactors. We're talking about fusion. I was in Culham, our fusion plant and research centre, just last week. We need to make sure that we are matching the investment with the energy delivery possibilities of the future. And if we get it right, oh my goodness, the opportunities that our country would face would be absolutely endless.
The other thing that many people worry about when it comes to AI are jobs. And look, I accept that jobs will be created in the AI sector, of course, if we embrace this, if we become a world leader in it, as Keir Starmer says. But if you're honest with people, AI will mean job losses as well, won't it?
Jobs will be created. I think the majority experience will be that jobs will become more satisfying because mundane tasks will become routinized by AI, which means that people can focus on what their talents are, what they went into the jobs for in the first place, which would be a much more satisfying experience in the workplace. But yes, there will be displacement too.
What we're doing mean?
Well, it does mean that some jobs will have to adapt, some jobs will be replaced. And I think what we're trying to do is understand the evolution of the marketplace. The jobs and the economy, they adapt over time anyway. So we're very used to having a fast-changing work environment. What we're committing to as a government is to make sure that we use the power of government to mitigate those changes, support communities and people through it, and make sure that we have people coming through our education system and later in life with lifelong learning to adapt to those changes, because we will not allow communities to be left behind. We will not allow communities to be abandoned as they were in the 1980s, as they have been with the successive Labour Tory government since. This government will invest in those communities and make sure that means staying in touch with the changes. It means investing in skills, as we are doing, and making sure that we have an education system that really is fit for the moment we're living in.
I mean, some people who are in the AI sector, like, for example, Professor Jeffrey Hinton, known by some as the kind of godfather of AI, he's worried about the jobs impact. He says that governments might need to look at things like universal basic incomes to deal with the impact of AI. Is that something that you would ever consider?
I've met the godfather and the godmother of AI, Fei-Fei Li.
Godmother's very important as well.
Yeah, Fei-Fei Li, who is an astonishing intellect, and I met her just before Christmas. These are people who think very deeply about the impact that AI will have, and they need to be respected. There are lots of different views about how AI will impact society and our economy and our country and the globe when you start looking 5 to 10 years out. What we need to do is get the basics right, get the infrastructure right, make sure we have a good, mature, reflexive legal and legislative system, a government that is there watching and interacting with this, because I am not going to stand on the sidelines when this change happens. So that we need to understand as much as we can, but we need to prepare when we're thinking to the long term, not based on one opinion on what might happen, but on the facts as they are evolving. And right now we have this huge opportunity. We are investing in that opportunity. We're partnering with investors who are putting billions into our economy, which is unlocking jobs and wealth today and into the future. That's how we're going to break this cycle that we were put into of high tax and low growth under the previous administration, and how we have a hope of moving forward. This is just one part of our plan for change. We're also doing the house building. We're also doing the regulatory changes, the planning changes.
This is a big part of it, isn't it? You feel the responsibility?
I really do. But I hope people can detect that I am hugely excited by this. There is a huge weight of responsibility in getting this right, because if we get it wrong, we will miss opportunities and we will create a lot of challenges for our country.
Okay.
But I'm excited by the potential and working really hard to make sure we capitalise on it.
I do want to talk about the wider economy as well, because, look, the pound is falling, government borrowing costs are rising. The markets have lost confidence in you, haven't they?
No, that's not true, because as you've seen today, another £14 billion worth of private investment going into our economy. That's not words, that is action. That is businesses getting out their chequebooks and investing in our country. Our country has turned a corner. We inherited a really difficult set of circumstances. We spent the summer explaining to the public just why we had a difficult set of circumstances and making sure everything was out in the open. We had the budget that fixed the foundations. Now we have the plan for change. You see today what I am doing with AI, and that is the digital infrastructure of the future.
Look, I'm talking about the reality. I mean, this is not like a value judgment. I'm talking about the reality of what is happening with the markets now. You know, whether that's government borrowing, whether that is, you know, the value of the pound. That's the message they're sending to you. They've lost faith in you.
Ministers don't comment on market movements for very, very understandable reasons. All I would say is that when you look at global trends and global impacts on other like-minded economies, you see a very similar pattern at the moment for lots of different geopolitical reasons. What you see with us, though, in the actions we're taking, is making sure we're getting the structure of our economy right, that we are investing, even in difficult times. Our R&D budget is up 8.5%. The money we are spending in the industries of the future and making sure we get the innovation out there, because no business, no country has ever turned around a failure into a success by not investing in the innovation and the future opportunities that lie before it.
Is Rachel Reeves safe?
Rachel Reeves is doing the most amazing job. I couldn't have done what I did today without Rachel. I couldn't have made any of the announcements that I've made without working with her, using her insight, using the power of the Treasury, and she has found ways of, yes, plugging the gaps, dealing with and mitigating the failure of what went before, but also finding ways to invest. We are investing in our future. What the previous lot were doing were managing the decline. Now, it's early days, but you are seeing policies like we saw today with AI investment zones, 2 new units in government, and an energy council that's going to put the voice of AI into the centre of government, bringing people and talent into government to try and do this. You're seeing plans that meet the scale of opportunities before us.
We've spoken a lot about AI. I had to... We've talked about the future of Rachel Reeves. Obviously, Keir Starmer's come out to kind of tweak his statement, if you like, to say that she will be Chancellor for the full term. I got my old Tom Baldwin book out, actually, the kind of biography of Keir Starmer, because there was a quote that I wanted to read today, where Keir Starmer tells him, "People will only believe we're changing politics when I fire someone on the spot. If a minister, any minister, makes a serious breach of the rules, they'll be out." And he's then asked, what if it's someone as vital to his project as Rachel Reeves? It doesn't matter who it is, they'll be sacked. Who's prepared to be ruthless, isn't he, if necessary?
Well, the key thing about knowing if someone's broken the rules is allowing the process to unfold when it is fully independent. Now, Tulip, who you're talking about, she referred herself to a fully independent commissioner who we gave more powers and more independence to. It would be very odd if somebody referred themselves into that kind of process and then a politician sort of stepped in. Now, I can't comment. I've been invited all weekend to comment on this. But the whole point of having an independent commissioner is that you don't have colleagues who have relationships getting involved in these sorts of decisions. I'm pretty sure you can tell by Keir and his actions ever since he's been leader of the Labour Party that he takes these sorts of judgments and processes incredibly seriously. And when he has the interests of the country at heart, the country is always first.
OK, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
My interview there with Peter Kyle. We are, of course, awaiting Joe Biden, the speech from the President, and we're going to be getting that to you just as soon as possible. We've been given a 2-minute warning, but in the meantime, we can speak to our US correspondent, Mark Stone, who is waiting as well. Mark, what are we expecting to hear from the President today?
A president who is trying to cement his legacy, his foreign policy legacy, frankly, Sophie. But you can probably hear behind me the chants of some protesters who have made their way here to the State Department in Washington, D.C. and made their voices heard as President Biden arrived here at the State Department, effectively America's Foreign Office, the Department of State. He's here to give a legacy speech, a speech which has been described as delivering remarks about the work of his administration to strengthen and lead the world. But I don't know if we can spin the camera around just briefly to show you what we've got here, which is a small group of protesters who've gathered here, as I say, to make their voices heard. They believe that President Biden is a war criminal. They believe that his administration's support for Israel and its actions in Gaza amounts to a genocide. There are a very small number here around the other side of the State Department. They numbered several dozen, I would say, but their views are certainly reflective of a proportion of people right around this country who are deeply uneasy about the American administration, about the Biden administration's actions in Gaza. American weapons, of course, being used to continue Israel's war there. On that, we may get some breaking news from the president over the course of the next hour or so. He may give some update on negotiations which are ongoing, more negotiations about a potential ceasefire in Gaza. More broadly, let's hear what he has to say about Ukraine and about China and all of his foreign policy legacy.
And Mark, it feels, doesn't it, that this is one of the last moments that President Biden has to really set his legacy as president. Donald Trump, of course, is going to be taking over from him, and part of his job, as with all incoming presidents, is to, I guess, try to trash the reputation of the person who went before, for want of a better phrase. How important do you think it is for Joe Biden to try and cement his own legacy here? Is that the point?
Well, look, I mean, what struck me, I was thinking about today and how he might frame his 4 years in office. And you might have thought that a foreign policy wonk, which Joe Biden is, over his many decades, 5 decades in politics in the United States, foreign policy has been his thing. And so you might think that it would be quite easy for him to stand in the State Department, as he will in a few moments, and deliver a foreign policy legacy as he would see it. But what is clear is that his legacy is not going to be written from his 5 decades in politics. It's going to be written from his 4 years as president, and actually probably the past 2 years, which have been so difficult for him, whether it be on Ukraine, the withdrawal from Afghanistan, or most recently the war in the Middle East. What he will say, I think, is, look, I managed to prevent World War III by allowing Ukraine to defend itself. I managed to bring Europe together in defense of Ukraine. He will say that on Afghanistan, he ended a foreign war, and on the Middle East, he will say, look how it's been reshaped with Iranian influence across the region being diminished so fundamentally. That is how he will see it. Many, though, will see chaos in the world. They do see chaos in the world. They attach that in part to him because, of course, they see the chaos that he has led over the course of the past 4 years. Let's listen in now to President Biden.
Good afternoon. If I didn't say anything, this would go on all afternoon, for good reason. Mr. President, it is an honor to welcome you back to the State Department. On day one of this administration, you shared a few things with me. You told me something that we long discussed, reminded me that American engagement, American leadership is essential. If we're not engaged, if we're not leading, you said, someone else is likely to be doing it, and probably not in a way that advances our interests or values. Or maybe no one's doing it, and then we're likely to have a vacuum filled with bad things before it's filled with good things. But the other thing you told me, Mr. President, was that there's a greater premium than ever before on finding ways to cooperate, to coordinate, to work with other countries if we're going to get done what we need to get done for the American people. And so you instructed me, you instructed all of us to get out there, to rebuild, to rejuvenate, even to reimagine our alliances and partnerships. And I remember what you told me then. You said, we don't know when this is going to make a difference, when we're going to need these friendships, these partnerships, but someday, some way, somewhere, they're going to be critical for advancing the national interest. And that's exactly what the men and women of this department have done. And we've been able to carry out that charge for two reasons. First, the people you see before you, and so many others who are out in the field at our embassies and consulates. You said when you came here 4 years ago that the leadership of diplomats of every stripe doing the daily work of government is essential, and they proved it. That daily work has become nightly work, 24/7, 7 days a week, hammering out agreements, jumping into action in crisis, creating opportunities for our citizens around the world, producing expert advice for you and your team at the White House. Everyone here knows this work can be tough. It's often not very glamorous, but it makes us stronger. It makes the world a better place. And we simply couldn't do it without the extraordinary men and women that you have before us, as well as our remarkable partners in government, starting with the great White House team led by Jake Sullivan, my friends and colleagues from across the administration, the Secretary of Defense, Samantha Power at USAID, the Secretary of the Treasury, Commerce, and so on. All of these partnerships that we built and built with their teams have made a difference. So to all of my colleagues, thank you. Thank you for your friendship. Thank you for your partnership. There's one other reason that we've been able to re-engage and rejuvenate our diplomacy. Mr. President, that's you. You have never wavered in the conviction that when America leads, when America engages, there is little we cannot accomplish, and that this country remains a force for good, a force for progress around the world. Your unshakable belief in the promise of America has inspired me for more than 20 years. It's inspired so many people in this department and around the world. Simply put, it's been the privilege of my lifetime to work for you, to work with you, to work with this extraordinary team that you've assembled. And it's the honor of a lifetime to be able to introduce, one more time, the 46th President of the United States, Joe Biden.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, please, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's good to be back at the State Department. Tony, if I may start by saying this, you're one of the finest men I've ever known in any undertaking, for one important reason. You have. You're not only brilliant, you have incredible character. You have character. You have more integrity than almost anybody I know. Thank you for always sticking with me. Appreciate it. Folks, I'm grateful for his counsel and his friendship as well, but I also want to thank the members of my cabinet and the members of the Congress who are here today, and to all our diplomats, development experts, service members, and intelligence professionals. Many of the achievements we're going to discuss today were the result of your hard work, and that's not hyperbole, it's true. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you for your extraordinary service. I come here to the State Department to report on to the American people on the progress we've made in the last 4 years in our foreign policy and our presidency. I've said many times, we're at an inflection point. The post-Cold War period is over. A new era has begun. In these 4 years, we faced crises that we've been tested. We've come through those tests stronger, in my view, than we entered those tests. This is a fierce competition underway. The future of the global economy, technology, human values, and so much else. Right now, in my view, thanks to our administration, the United States is winning the worldwide competition. Compared to 4 years ago, America is stronger. Our alliances are stronger. Our adversaries and competitors are weaker. We have not gone to war to make these things happen. During my presidency, I've increased America's power at every dimension. We've increased our diplomatic power, creating more allies than the United States has ever had in the history of our nation. We've increased our military power, making the most significant investments in the defense industrial base in decades. We've increased the technology power, taking the lead in artificial intelligence and other technologies of the future. And we've increased the economic power, building the most dynamic economy in the world from the bottom up and the middle out, not the top down. In short, Kamala and I took office, our nation had become stronger at home, are stronger in the world. And now, America is more capable and, I would argue, better prepared than we've been in a long, long time. While our competitors and adversaries are facing stiff headwinds, we have the wind at our back because of all of you. This is what we're heading into. And over the next administration, that's what we're handing it to. Today, I want to lay out what we've done, the opportunities we've created for America, and those opportunities going forward. Today, I can report to the American people, our sources of national power are far stronger than we were when we took office. Our economy is booming, although there's more work to do. Our technologies, from artificial intelligence to biotech, quantum, and to advanced semiconductors, they're the envy of the world. And we have made the most significant investments in America and the American workers since the New Deal. To rebuild our roads and bridges, our ports and airports, clean water systems, affordable high-speed internet, and so much more. To build American manufacturing, to make advanced semiconductors, which we invented here at home. We made the largest investment in climate and clean energy ever anywhere on Earth in the history of the world, spurring nearly $500 billion in private sector investment. We've also significantly strengthened the defense industrial base, investing almost $1.3 trillion in procurement and research and development. In real dollars, that's more than America did in any 4-year period during the Cold War. This is going to ensure that we're fully equipped to fight and win wars, which is also the best way to deter wars in the first place. Today, I can report to the American people, our alliances are stronger than they've been in decades. NATO is more capable than it's ever been. And many more of our allies are paying their fair share. Before I took office, 9 NATO allies were spending 2% of their GDP on defense. Now, 23 are spending 2%. Look at the Indo-Pacific. We've made partnerships stronger and created new partnerships to challenge China's aggressive behavior and to rebalance power in the region. We did it, what few thought was possible, to build the first ever trilateral partnership between the United States, Japan, and South Korea. Then another among the United States, Japan, and the Philippines, drawing closer our Pacific allies to defend our shared security and prosperity. We brokered a defense pact known as AUKUS among the United States, Australia, and the United Kingdom, connecting the Atlantic and Pacific allies as only America is able to do. And we've taken the Quad to the next level. the United States, Japan, Australia, and India. When we had that first meeting, I was dumbfounded when they all called and said, "Can we do this at your house?" I think I'm kidding. My wife said, "No problem." It was during the UN meeting, and we thought we were going to do it in New York, but they wanted to do it in Delaware. I said, "Why?" I said, "We can know, then people will know we're really friends." Our democracy, with vibrant economies, working closely, security, supply chains, technology, and so much more. In the Red Sea, we brought together more than 20 countries to protect civilian ships from attack by the Houthis, defending freedom of navigation, one of the world's busiest waterways. And we have strengthened partnerships all across the Americas, defending democracy, targeting corruption, addressing migration, increasing prosperity, and protecting Amazon rainforest, which captures billions of tons of carbon from the atmosphere every year. Overall, we've reinvigorated people's faith in the United States as a true partner. Today, I can report to the American people, our adversaries are weaker than were when we came into this job 4 years ago. Just consider Russia. When Putin invaded Ukraine, he thought he'd conquer Kyiv in a matter of days. But the truth is, since that war began, I'm the only one that stood in the center of Kyiv, not him. Putin never has. Think about it. It was a long train ride, but I'm the only commander-in-chief to visit a war zone not controlled by U.S. forces. We helped Ukrainians stop Putin. And now, nearly three years later, Putin has failed to achieve any of his strategic objectives. He has failed thus far to subjugate Ukraine, failed to break the unity of NATO, and failed to make large territorial gains. There's more to do. We can't walk away. We rallied 50 nations to stand with Ukraine, not just in Europe, but for the first time in Asia as well. Because those countries in Asia know what happens in Ukraine matters to them as well. We delivered air interceptors, massive numbers of munitions, enacted relentless, unprecedented sanctions to keep Ukraine in the fight. And now Russia is struggling to replace what they are losing on the battlefield in terms of military equipment and fighters. And the ruble is under enormous pressure. As I saw it, when Putin launched his invasion, I had two jobs. One, to rally the world to defend Ukraine, and the other is to avoid war between two nuclear powers. We did both those things. Today, Ukraine is still free, independent country with the potential for a bright future. And we laid the foundation for the next administration so they can protect the bright future of the Ukrainian people. And now, look at Iran. Did you ever think we'd be where we are with Iran at this moment? After those despicable attacks by Hamas on October the 7th, Iran directly attacked Israel twice with hundreds of ballistic missiles and drones. And twice they failed because the United States organized a coalition of countries to stop them and ordered U.S. aircraft to come to the defense of Israel. Now, Iran's air defenses are in shambles. Their main proxy, Hezbollah, is badly wounded. And as we tested Iran's willingness to revive the nuclear deal, we kept the pressure with sanctions. Now Iran's economy is in desperate straits. All told, Iran is weaker than it has been in decades. And if you want more evidence that we've seriously weakened Iran and Russia, just take a look at Syria. President Assad was both countries' closest ally in the Middle East. Neither could keep him in power. Quite frankly, neither really tried very hard. Now, I cannot claim credit for every factor that led to Iran and Russia growing weaker in the past 4 years. They did plenty of damage all by themselves. but Israel did plenty of damage to Iran and its proxies. But there's no question our actions contributed significantly, and now major authoritarian states are aligning more closely with one another. Iran, Russia, China, North Korea. But that's more out of weakness than out of strength. So as the new administration begins, the United States is in a fundamentally stronger position with respect to these countries than we were 4 years ago. Today, I can report to the American people we're in a better strategic position in the long-term competition with China than we were when I took office. You all recall, many experts believe were predicting it was inevitable that China's economy would surpass ours. According to many predictions, that would happen by the year 2030 or shortly thereafter. But we in this room said no. If we make the investments in ourselves, if we protect our workers and technologies, that will not happen. Now, according to the latest predictions, on China's current course, they will never surpass us, period. I met one-on-one with President Xi in consequential summits. He and I have always been direct and straightforward with each other. I made it clear we expect China and everyone to abide by the international rules. And so we stood up against unfair trade practices, taking action when China dumped subsidized goods, incredibly subsidized, on our markets to undercut our workers. We imposed target tariffs in critical sectors like cars, steel, and semiconductors, rather than across-the-board tariffs. We imposed historic export controls on investments, restrictions, to ensure that China cannot use the most advanced technology and sensitive data against us. And critically, we enlisted our allies and partners to join us, building more convergence among our allies on a shared approach to China than ever existed, and showing that it's more effective to deal with China alongside of partners rather than going it alone. But even while we compete vigorously, we've managed our relationship with China responsibly, so it's never tipped over into conflict. We've created lines of communication between President Xi and myself, and between the leaders of our militaries, to avoid misunderstanding. We found ways to work with each other, to address climate change, to reduce the flow of fentanyl in the United States, which, by the way, overdose deaths are coming down across our nation. And in my administration, we've seized more fentanyl at our border in 2 years than the previous 5 years combined. Today, I can also report to the American people, we're the first president in decades who's not leaving a war in Afghanistan to his successor. But we've got bin Laden during the Obama-Biden administration, the primary objective of war had been accomplished. And I believe that going forward, the primary threat of al-Qaeda would no longer be emanating from Afghanistan, but from elsewhere. And so we not need to station a sizable number of American forces in Afghanistan. So when I took office, I had a choice. Ultimately, I saw no reason to keep thousands of servicemen in Afghanistan. I think I have my schedule with me, and I keep on my, I don't have, but I keep on the back of my card the actual number of dead and wounded that occurred in our longest war, to remind myself. Keep spending hundreds of millions of dollars a day. We're no longer doing that. In my view, it was time to end the war and bring our troops home, and we did. I commend the courage of all those who served in Afghanistan. We grieve all 2,461 Americans who made the ultimate sacrifice in the longest war in American history. And I grieve those brave service members whose lives were lost during the withdrawal. We also thank those inside and outside of government who have done so much to help thousands of Afghan families resettle in the United States. Remember, critics said if we ended the war, it would damage our alliances and create threats to our homeland from foreign directed terrorism out of a safe haven in Afghanistan. Neither has occurred. Neither has occurred. And our alliance has stayed strong. We've used our over-the-horizon capabilities to strike in Afghanistan and elsewhere when we had to. For instance, eliminating Zawahiri, the leader of al-Qaeda, who helped orchestrate the September 11th attacks. And we did it without putting more American boots on the ground. And by ending the war, we've been able to focus our energy and resources on more urgent challenges. There is nothing, I can tell you from my conversations with both Xi and Putin, nothing our adversaries and competitors like Russia and China would have liked more than seeing us to continue to be tied down in Afghanistan for another decade. For all those reasons, ending the war was the right thing to do, and I believe history will reflect that. And from the moment I entered office, I also worked to free as many Americans as possible being held hostage or wrongfully detained overseas. We brought home more than 75 Americans by last count. In some cases, it took months, even years of effort, like the prisoner swap with Russia over the past summer. A feat of diplomacy involving many of you and involving multiple countries who joined complex negotiations at our request. Another example of the power of our alliances. We did not have these relationships, those women and women would likely still be in prison. And finally, I can report to the American people that we restored our leadership in a range of other generational priorities. When I took office, we were no longer part of the International Climate Agreement. We announced on day one that we would join the Paris Accord, rejoin. And we've led by example. We've conserved hundreds of millions of acres of land and water, more than any president in American history, making investments in clean energy and convincing other nations to join us. Thanks to our efforts, the world has reached the goal of investing $100 billion every year in public and private funds to reduce greenhouse emissions, to drive down the cost of clean energy, to help developing nations adapt to climate change. Our administration has launched a transformative initiative to build high-impact infrastructure in developing nations. It's called PGI. You all know that better than anyone. This is our alternative to what China offers with its massive projects across Africa and beyond. But their approach features no workers' rights, no environmental protections, unmanageable debt, shoddy construction, all in exchange for military access to ports and other exploitative purposes. By contrast, we've leveraged $600 billion and unleashed the private sector to build an infrastructure in order to grow economies and combat climate change. As an example, I was recently in Angola to see a major project being built with the help of American public funding, which brought in even more private investment. We're building the first ever transcontinental railroad across Africa. It will significantly improve the economies of the region, will help farmers transport crops in new global markets, will transport critical minerals that are needed for electric vehicles and semiconductors. China used to control the supply chains in these materials, but not for long. Now, make no mistake, there are serious challenges the United States must continue to deal with. In Ukraine, in the Middle East, in the Indo-Pacific, must keep the pressure on the Houthis, who are attacking ships in the Red Sea, launching missiles at Israel, and firing at American forces. Must deter North Korea as they rattle their saber and draw closer to Russia. And new challenges will certainly emerge in the months and years ahead. But even so, it's clear, my administration is leaving the next administration with a very strong hand to play. And we're leaving them in America with more friends and stronger alliances, whose adversaries are weaker and under pressure. And America that once again is leading, uniting countries, setting the agenda, bringing others together behind our plans and visions. In America, which is no longer at war, which has made historic investments in American workers, American energies, American factories, generating the strongest economy in the world, which is now in a much better position to win the future against any competitor. These wins are not partisan. They're American. They benefit all Americans and reflect America's endless capacity for leadership and reinvention. Look, folks, the United States should take full advantage of our diplomatic and geopolitical opportunities we've created to keep bringing countries together to deal with challenges posed by China, to make sure Putin's war ends in a just and lasting peace for Ukraine, and to capitalize on a new moment for a more stable, integrated Middle East. To do that, the next administration must make sure the fall of Assad does not lead to the resurgence of ISIS in Syria and across the region. It must carry forward the commitment that America will never, never allow Iran to acquire a nuclear weapon. And on the war between Israel and Hamas, we're on the brink of a proposal that I laid out in detail months ago, finally coming to fruition. I have learned in many years of public service to never, 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 ever give up. So I spoke to Prime Minister of Israel yesterday. I spoke to Emir Qatar today. I look forward to speaking with President Sisi soon. We're pressing hard to close this. The deal we have structured would free the hostages, halt the fighting, provide security to Israel, and allow us to significantly surge humanitarian assistance to the Palestinians who've suffered terribly in this war that Hamas started. They've been through hell. So many innocent people have been killed. So many communities have been destroyed. The Palestinian people deserve peace and the right to determine their own futures. Israel deserves peace and real security. And the hostages and their families deserve to be reunited. And so we're working urgently to close this deal. And as we deal with immediate challenges, in my view, we have to look to the future. I urge the next administration to carry forward two issues that have been central to my presidency and which shape the future, in my view. On artificial intelligence, we are in the lead, and we must stay in the lead. We must not offshore artificial intelligence, as we once did with computer chips and other critical technologies. AI has the power to reshape economies, governments, national security, entire societies. And it must be the United States and our closest allies that lead the way to ensure people's rights are respected, their safety is protected, and their data is secure. And likewise, clean energy transition will race ahead in the years to come. I know some in the incoming administration are skeptical about the need for clean energy. They don't even believe climate change is real. I think they come from a different century. They're wrong. They are dead wrong. It's the single greatest existential threat to humanity. The clean energy transition is already happening. China is trying to dominate the clean energy, manufacturing, critical materials, supply chains. They want to capture the market of the future and create new dependencies. The United States must win that contest, and we will shape the global economy and the planet for decades to come. Let me close with this. Like many of you, I've dedicated a significant portion of my career to our nation's foreign policy. As chair of the Foreign Relations Committee as a senator, vice president for 8 years, and now president of the United States, I put together one of the most competent foreign policy teams, I would argue, in American history, sitting in this room and before my eyes. Throughout my career, The world has undergone tremendous change. But certain things have always held true. At our best, America leads not only by the example of our power, but the power of our example. In the past 4 years, we've used that power, not to go it alone, but instead to bring countries together, to increase shared security and prosperity, to stand up to aggression, and to solve problems through diplomacy wherever possible, and to relentlessly defend democracy, civil rights, and human rights. Because that's who we are. That's who we are. You've heard me say it many times before. We're the only country on earth founded on idea. Every other country is founded on geography, religion, ethnicity, or some other unifying factor. But America was built on an idea, literally, not figuratively. That idea was all women and men are created equal. The idea that has inspired the world for 250 years and counting. We're always reaching to do better, always looking to the future, and at our best, always seeking progress for our people and for people everywhere. It's been the honor of my life to serve as your president. Today, I'm optimistic about our future, as optimistic as I've ever been. Just have to remember who in the hell we are. You've heard me say it many times. We're the United States of America, for God's sake. There is nothing beyond our capacity if we do it together and commit to it. Nothing. So thank you all for all you've done. I hope many of you are going to be staying in the next administration to keep this moving. May God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
President Joe Biden there giving a major foreign policy speech ahead of Donald Trump's inauguration as president next week. The idea, of course, to try and set out his achievements and his legacy when it comes to foreign policy, an area that he's always felt he's got a strong hand in. He claimed that America is in a stronger place than 4 years ago before he was president in terms of home and also foreign policy. But the major newsline really coming out of that was his statement that the Gaza deal is on the brink of coming into fruition, saying that they are hopeful that they're close to a deal on a ceasefire and on a hostage rescue. Let's bring in our US correspondent, Mark Stone, shall we, who was listening across this. Mark, what did you make of the speech?
Well, I was just thinking now as you were coming to me whether or not I detected a bitterness. Maybe bitter is too strong a word, but certainly a deep frustration from the president there as he laid out what he sees as his foreign policy successes, not just 4 years as president, but 8 years as vice president and as a senator for 4 decades before that. Foreign policy is his thing. It has always been his strongest point. And yet, you got the sense that he was almost saying to the American people, why didn't you vote me back in? Why didn't you vote the Democrats back in? Look what we have achieved, and yet you don't see it. But of course, politics, elections, they're all about perception, perhaps more than a reality. And although he states that America is stronger now, he would argue, than it was 4 years ago, that America's adversaries are weaker now than they were 4 years ago. That second point may well be true. Russia, potentially, you could say, is weaker, given that it is stuck in a stalemate war in Ukraine and is throwing so many soldiers and so much armaments into that war. and is certainly not winning the war. It's not losing, but it's not winning. You look at the Middle East, you look at how Iran has been degraded and its proxies have been degraded. He claims some credit for that, perhaps more than many would give him. But those 2 points are true, and yet the perception over the course of the past 4 years has been a sense of chaos. Chaos in the Middle East, chaos in Eastern Europe. And President Biden has been in the White House during that period of chaos. And then, of course, there is Afghanistan. He frames the Afghan moment, that withdrawal from Afghanistan just under 4 years ago, as a moment of success because he ended America's longest foreign war. As he said, he is the only president who has been able not to hand over that war to another president because he finished that war, but he did so with a huge degree of chaos, a chaotic withdrawal. Now, detractors, critics of President Biden would argue that the method of the withdrawal from Afghanistan emboldened people like Vladimir Putin, who thought, look how chaotic America is. It's got out of Afghanistan in such a chaotic way. Maybe now's the moment that we can move on Ukraine. And so he did. And so there are, of course, two ways to spin the past 4 years. A huge amount of top spin by President Biden. He sees his legacy as being great when it comes to foreign policy. Many others see it differently, and certainly a majority of the American people, well, they also see it differently, and they chose a different path. They chose the path of President Trump, who will take over in just under a week's time.
And let's have a thought, shall we, on what is happening in Gaza, because it felt that was a significant moment in the speech when he said that a deal was on the brink of coming to fruition. It obviously isn't far off and long for him to have completely signed it off or to be able to announce it, but it does feel like things are moving.
Yeah, but, you know, Sophie, deja vu maybe. I mean, how many times have we been there before? So many times. And yet he does now feel, and certainly I was at an event this morning with Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, who perhaps even more so was optimistic that by the end of this week, within the next few days, maybe there will be a ceasefire, which would lead to a more permanent form of peace in Gaza. We'll see. I just don't know how likely that would be. And I suppose that is an example of how President Biden's legacy is not cemented at all. It is still very much in flux. If he doesn't get a deal, a ceasefire deal on Gaza by the end of his term, he will be bitterly disappointed.
OK, Mark, thank you very much indeed. Well, that is it from us tonight. I'll see you tomorrow at 7. More, of course, on Biden's legacy coming up.